So I will start with an overview of the challenge we face with the climate crisis in Massachusetts. Here in Massachusetts, we have had mandatory greenhouse gas emissions reductions since 2008 because of the Global Warming Solutions Act. These were updated earlier this year by the Climate Roadmap Bill, which we'll talk briefly about, to be 50% emissions reductions by 2030, still the same 80% emissions reductions by 2040, and net zero emissions by 2050. This is very exciting because before that it was just 80% by 2050, and we all know that that is just not going to do it when it comes to the climate crisis and completing a responsibility to reduce emissions to fight this global problem. Through our advocacy at Green Energy Consumers Alliance, we work towards the development of smart and cost-effective programs and policies to meet these climate goals. Today, we'll talk briefly about the different sectors of emissions that we are trying to address and the work that we're doing to reduce the emissions in each of them. I like to start with this pie chart of where our emissions in Massachusetts come from, because I think it's a helpful orienting to know what types of policies are most important and how we can reduce emissions from all of the sectors. Transportation produces the most emissions. This slide, by the way, is from 2017 because we haven't had a greenhouse gas emissions inventory since 2017 in Massachusetts, but hopefully we'll be able to update that soon. And most likely the balance of where emissions are coming from in Massachusetts has not changed that much since 2017. Transportation is the bulk of emissions. Buildings and heating, that is the natural gas system that powers our building heat systems, as well as oil heating, propane, biomass, things like that. That is 33%. And then electricity, that is the power plants that produce our electricity, is 19% of emissions from Massachusetts. However, electricity is super important because one of the main ways of reducing emissions in transportation and buildings is electrifying them, which means that in order to shrink the pieces of the pie that are transportation and buildings, we'll also have to grow the amount of electricity we're using. And we want to make sure that that is renewable electricity so that that sector of the pie continues to shrink as well. Massachusetts needs to have strong planning in order to meet these statutory climate goals. The Clean Energy and Climate Plan is the administration's plan for how it's going to comply with our laws around the climate goals. We do clean energy and climate plans every 5 years, I believe, to get us to our goals. The most recent one the draft was released in December of 2020. And the final draft is due July 2022. If any of you were in my breakout session last year at our fall meeting, you'll remember us talking about the Clean Energy and Climate Plan. And it's kind of wild to me that we are still talking about it a year later and will be for another 6 more months. But this plan is very important. It covers all sectors and lays out the numerous strategies that the administration plans to take to meet these goals. The development or finalization of this plan is being pushed even further out because the Next Generation Roadmap for Massachusetts Climate Policy, an act, was signed in March 2021 by the governor. And this act created some new requirements for the CECP. It upped the amount of emissions reductions required to 50% by 2030. It also upped the amount of offshore wind that is planned to be procured in the state, adopted new appliance efficiency standards, which we're really excited about. That's something that we worked really hard on for years. It set new environmental justice protocols. It created new requirements for the energy efficiency programs. It also created new funds for workforce development and equity in Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, and many other things. We're not going to go all the way into what this bill did, but we do have that information on our blog, which I encourage you to check out. This piece of legislation is really important because it accelerates the timeline of the action that the administration needs to take to meet climate goals. However, it also makes it even more difficult. So that's why we're waiting to see what the administration comes up with in the next draft of the Clean Energy and Climate Plan. The first draft had some good ideas. We'll talk about them later on in this presentation. However, it was not enough. Some of our comments on the first draft of the plan included that we really want to see more ambition on the electric sector in particular. And I will move on to the electricity sector on the next slide. So the electric sector, as I mentioned earlier, is crucial to reducing emissions across the board in Massachusetts. It's also one of the areas in which we are in some ways best prepared to reduce emissions, because Massachusetts has been growing its renewable energy programs for a long time, and we have an incredible amount of capacity in offshore wind in particular. Offshore wind is poised to be one of the biggest new industries in Massachusetts, and we've made some really exciting movement on offshore wind in the past year. We will need the cheap, affordable, and reliable electricity that is provided by offshore wind to meet our climate goals. And we believe that it will help accelerate the decarbonization of the electric sector. Over the last year, I believe back in May, Vineyard Wind received its final approval and permits to start construction, and Vineyard Wind started construction just a few weeks ago in November. So that is a really exciting step forward. Vineyard Wind will be the first large-scale offshore wind project in the country. There are two very small ones currently, one in Rhode Island and one in Virginia. But Vineyard Wind is going to bring many jobs to Massachusetts, it already is, as well as 800 megawatts of very affordable power at a wholesale rate of 7 cents. And that is one of the cheapest that we have seen. We also have the 800 megawatt Mayflower Wind project that is in the permitting process, and the roadmap, the climate roadmap bill that was passed earlier this year upped the required amount of megawatts to be procured by 2,400. So that means that there will be up to 4,000 megawatts that are currently statutorily enabled to be procured by the distribution companies in Massachusetts. So that is a total of 5,600 megawatts of wind. That's a huge amount, and it will do an incredible job to power Massachusetts by mostly renewable energy by 2030. That said, we still need more, and we need even more because some of you may have heard that the big hydro power project that Massachusetts was expecting several years ago, the Baker administration started a contract to procure about 20% of Massachusetts electricity from hydro in Canada. And that project is looking to be in jeopardy because of the issue of transmitting that power through Maine from Canada to Massachusetts. The people of Maine have voted to oppose that project. So we're really not sure if that's going to happen, although there are some court cases happening to try to get that project built. If we indeed do not have 20% of our electric mix coming from hydropower from Canada, then we're going to need even more offshore wind. So we are supporting a project that will, or we're supporting legislation that would further expand offshore wind and also require strong labor standards, strong environmental standards in offshore wind in Massachusetts going forward. There's a lot of energy from about offshore wind from our political leaders in Massachusetts, especially Chair Roy of the Telecommunications Committee and Speaker Mariano of the Massachusetts House. They have talked about trying to pass another offshore wind-focused piece of legislation as soon as possible. Most recently, in informal session in Massachusetts, the Arpa Bill, which is about federal spending, set aside a lot of money, over $100 million, I believe, for various offshore wind infrastructure. As we get more renewable energy in Massachusetts, we are going to need to make sure our electric grid can handle it. That's why we are intervening in 2 cases at the Department of Public Utilities in Massachusetts that are focused on grid modernization and smart meters. This is 21-80, 21-81. 21-80 is the Eversource case. 21-81 is about National Grid. In both of these cases, the utility companies have filed plans to invest in certain grid modernization infrastructure It will make the grid better able to take in renewable energy and distribute it around Massachusetts. It's especially focused on things like solar, which are distributed energy, small-scale solar scattered around the state. They have also proposed to install smart meters in residential consumer homes. That is really exciting to us because that will enable better efficiency programs like Shave the Peak, which many of you may be part of, and time of use rates, which would compensate energy consumers for using electricity at the time that is best for the environment and best for the electric grid. And I'll pass over to Mao to talk about transportation.
Thanks, Kai. So as Larry had mentioned in the larger room, we at Green Energy Consumers are extremely disappointed in Governor Baker's decision to pull Massachusetts out of the Transportation and Climate Initiative Program, or TCI for short. The program would have generated $160 million annually for Massachusetts over 10 years to be able to invest in clean transportation options. So that would mean electric vehicle charging infrastructure. It could mean more investments in transit, more investments in active mobility, all things that would reduce emissions while making our mobility and transportation infrastructure more resilient and better serving of Massachusetts residents. And so, yeah, we are definitely looking to Governor Baker to propose a plan B, because the TCI program was a central strategy for the clean energy and climate plan that Kai was talking about earlier. So without TCI on the table, we're curious to see exactly how the state is planning on investing in a decarbonized transportation system. As a consumer organization, Green Energy Consumers is also aware of the irony of the governors of Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island pulling out of TCI because of high gas prices. Gasoline is extremely volatile as a consumer product in terms of price. It's one of the reasons why electric vehicles are extremely appealing to folks that want to ratchet down their fuel costs and their driving costs, because electricity doesn't vary as much in terms of cost. And so TCI would have been able to help more people switch away from gasoline to transportation options that are more consistent in price and also lower in emissions. So we're definitely looking to support other policies and other ideas to help Massachusetts transition to cleaner forms of transportation. But we're very aware that there is not a specific policy that fills in the gap that TCI is, or the lack of TCI is creating. And so we're really looking forward to doing some more advocacy work around that in 2022. I will say that regardless of what you might see in the media, the TCI program is not dead. It's more like on life support. So the program can move forward anytime 3 states decide to sign on and continue. So we definitely are optimistic for 2023 for the TCI program. But it's not all bad news. We are very impressed with the utility investments proposed by National Grid and Eversource to expand electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Alongside of the investments that National Grid and Eversource are proposing for grid modernization, they also have a couple of dockets to expand the EV charging infrastructure in Massachusetts. So for several years now, both utilities have had programs to help businesses and fleets and apartment buildings install charging by covering the cost of the utility side infrastructure for those charging stations. But now they're proposing a huge expansion of those programs alongside lots of really important investments to help pay for the actual charging equipment. They're planning on investing in some new ideas like creating DC fast charging hubs so that people who don't have access to charging at home can potentially switch to an EV anyway because of community charging, and also some great and exciting ideas about providing school districts with rebates to be able to buy electric school buses. They are interested in pursuing on-street charging pilot programs to see whether you can put charging stations on utility poles, which they already own. And so we're seeing a huge increase in investment from both utilities. You can see the breakdown of how each utility plans on focusing on the different segments. And for comparison, the phase one of these programs were sized at about $40 million for Eversource and $25 million for National Grid. So you can see it's a much larger investment and a commitment. So right now, Green Energy Consumers is working on trying to support these ideas. The dockets will be under scrutiny at the DPU through June 2022. And we're actively involved in making sure that these programs move forward in a way that allows Massachusetts to expand its charging infrastructure so that we can meet our electric vehicle adoption goals and also support efforts to make sure that consumers get a good deal out of it. So I'll pass it on to Kai.
Thank you, Mel. And to touch on the final sector of emissions that we really need strong program and policy to address, buildings. Buildings is especially challenging because the solutions are not as well developed as in the electric sector and transportation sector. I will say the challenge before us in all of these areas is immense, but with buildings, electrification is, I think there's a lot more open-endedness around what the right policy to support the decarbonization of buildings are. We're going to need a lot of different policies. A lot of all of these different pieces of policy are part of the solution. And today I'll touch on energy efficiency in particular. This past year, many stakeholders have been involved in developing, advocating for strong emissions reductions policy in the 2022 through 2024 Mass Save Energy Efficiency Plan. I imagine most of you are familiar with Mass Save. This is the utility-run energy efficiency programs that are also statutorily required in Massachusetts. They provide free energy audits to anyone in Massachusetts. They also are responsible for providing incentives for energy efficient equipment and the home energy reports that will let you have an idea of how much energy you're using every month and so much more. These energy efficiency programs are responsible for a lot of the emissions reductions we have seen over the past decade in electric sector and building sector. And yet they are just not, historically, they are not doing enough to get us on a path to reducing emissions in line with state climate goals in the building sector or the electric sector. However, this energy efficiency plan, which stakeholders have been working on for over a year now, is a really big step forward on energy efficiency. And I'll talk a little bit about why that is. The Massachusetts Climate Roadmap Bill that passed this past March, one of the many things that it did was require the Office of EEA in Massachusetts, the Energy Environmental Agency, to set a greenhouse gas emissions reductions goal required for the Mass Save Energy Efficiency Plan. And this chart here demonstrates what exactly is so exciting about that requirement. The April draft, you'll see, so on the left, we have the Secretary's goal of 2030 of metric tons of carbon emissions reduced by 2030. The April draft is the first draft that the program administrators, the utility companies, came out with of the 2022 through 2024 energy efficiency plan. What they had proposed initially was really nowhere near the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that we needed to see. But because this was required for the program administrators to achieve, you can see there's later drafts on October 6th, and the final plan actually do get us to that goal. And this resulted in a plan that is by far the biggest we've ever seen in Massachusetts, both in the amount of investments going into energy efficiency and the amount of benefits that we're going to receive. The beautiful thing about these energy efficiency plans is that every dollar that ratepayers invest in them comes back and benefits to Massachusetts residents. This plan, over 3 years, has a $4 billion budget on gas and electric and $14 billion in benefits, which include lowered bills for consumers in Massachusetts, utility system benefits that reduce the amount of investment that we need in things like substations, new gas pipelines, and also health, climate, economic, and other benefits. So this plan is going to be really incredible for Massachusetts. It is currently before the Department of Public Utilities for final approval. Last week, many folks weighed in at the public hearings at the DPU in support of this plan. Also of note is that in the past, we have not seen the utility companies serving environmental justice communities or low-income folks as well as they need to be in Massachusetts. A lot of people, especially who don't speak English, who are renters, don't have access to energy efficiency the same way that people who have more money or have single-family homes do. This plan has a number of equity and EJ commitments that go above and beyond past plans. For example, a target investment in environmental justice communities. There is a requirement that the program administrators will create a strategic plan to target renters and serve renters better. There's also increased electrification goals of over 67,000 residential heat pumps. And for the first time, the program administrators have committed to electrifying a small number of gas heat systems, which is notable because the utility companies are also gas companies. So electrifying their gas heating systems goes against what you would expect program administrators to do. However, all of this is just not enough. 67,000 residential heat pumps is nowhere close to what the draft CECP promised in terms of 1 million residential homes electrified by 2030. And we need other forms of policy to get us to our goals on the building sector. Since the passage of the roadmap bill and also since the draft CECP came out last December, the administration has really fallen behind on the building sector in particular. They promised to set up a clean heat commission to come up with strategies on the building sector by last May. It is now December, and that clean heat commission is still not up and running, despite an executive order that came out earlier this fall related to the Clean Heat Commission and announcing it. In addition, they have kicked the can down the road with regard to a new building code, a net zero building code, another requirement of roadmap, and those public hearings were supposed to be this fall. They're now not going to happen until this spring. The Clean Energy and Climate Plan proposed a heating fuels emissions cap. We don't really know where that's at, and we'll generally need to see a lot more movement on this. So we will be supporting some legislation to reduce emissions from buildings, and we'll talk about that probably in future webinars or blogs. And we want to make sure that we have time for at least a couple questions, so we'll move on to that. But first, please remember to give if you can. Your contributions are really important to us being able to do this work. So thanks so much, and we will now go over to questions.
Thanks, Kai. I'll start off by reading out a question from Alan, which is, has the More EV program been renewed by the legislature? It was due to expire at the end of December. This is a relatively easy one that I'm happy to take on because it's transportation related. The answer is the program has been renewed. The funding that was allocated through December 2021 should be able to move forward through the summer of 2022. I think it's either June and July, or June or July. And I think the announcement just happened yesterday. So it's hot off the presses, brand new. Great question. I'll move on to this next question for Kai from John, which says, Will the new Mass Save rebate programs include rebates for residential transition from natural gas to electric heat pumps? If so, how big are the new rebates and when will they take effect?
Yes, so I guess I'll start by answering the question saying that the plan is still before the DPU and awaiting final approval of the DPU. The DPU could conceivably make changes, but the draft plan stakeholder support does, for the first time ever, support incentives for converting natural gas homes to electric. I don't know off the top of my head how big they will be, but if the plan is approved, then we would expect that to start in January. And I'm not sure if there will be any additional requirements for your home, but for example, you will also need to have a well-weatherized home, but that's a great thing to have no matter what.
Great. We have a question from Allison about the confusion that lots of community and municipal groups are having related to decarbonizing buildings and local building codes. So the question is, how can communities make good, informed, and inclusive decisions about how to move forward with that process?
I will start by saying that I totally share in the confusion and angst around decarbonizing buildings more broadly. It's one of the most difficult things that we have ahead of us. I think that net zero building codes focus primarily on new buildings, which is relatively easy because new buildings can be made net zero at same cost or less cost than a new fossil fuel building. So that's kind of where net zero buildings are focused. Net zero local building codes are focused. And to the question of how can communities make good, informed, and inclusive decisions, I will point to NEEP, the Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnership, as a great resource on local building codes. MCAN has also been doing a lot of work on local building codes. MAPC is another organization that is great on this, and they focus on getting those resources to local communities. Green Energy Consumers supports the EZ code that NEEP is proposing for a statewide net zero code. And so this spring, there will be public hearings run by DOER on proposed building code. We really want to see more action engagement from municipalities saying that they will adopt this code if it is available. Because for that code to be proposed statewide, it's great to have buy-in from local communities. So I think, although I think there's lots of resources out there to describe what this code is and what it means for communities, and we do want to see more from communities supporting that. Recently, there was a sign-on letter from a bunch of different communities supporting net zero building codes. So if your community has not been part of that, then that is an option for us to, as advocates, advocate for our communities to sign on to that letter. And we can send that around with our follow-up information so that you have that information and can ask your council or mayor to sign on.
Awesome. Carol Collins also seems to be interested in some resources about the details of the 3-year efficiency plans. Can you point to any good places to learn about that?
Yes, I think there are some great resources on the EEAC website. However, if any of you have been on the EEAC website, then you know that it is like a huge onslaught of information, and there are dozens of 300-page documents, reports, plans. So there are also lots of good roundups, I believe, online from different organizations. We haven't posted a roundup yet, but I plan to do that within the next week. So stay tuned to follow our blog for some highlights of the efficiency plans. And again, we can also send that out in our follow-up email. I have a couple of shorter roundups of the highlights of the efficiency plan that we can make sure to include.
I definitely know that both of us are very busy in terms of trying to read through state documents and translate it so that regular folks interested in these issues can follow. That's been a big issue with the DPU dockets as well. So just want to re-up Kai's plug for our blog, which typically is the best resource to be able to learn what's going on in Massachusetts quickly and without having to go through all of those documents. Robert had a question about what the legislature's role will be in moving ahead with the roadmap. So can you talk a little bit about what that process will be like?
Yes. So it's an interesting legislative session. To give an overview, the Massachusetts has 2-year legislative sessions. Our current legislative session began this past January and will go until July. There has been many climate-related bills that have been filed. We support many of them. But the legislature, I think there is a sense that it already kind of passed its big climate bill, even back in March, even though that really was an extension of the last legislative session when the House and Senate passed their own separate bills, but weren't able to come to agreement before session ended. So I do think that there is a role for the legislature before this legislative session ends in July to pass bills that enable better implementation of roadmap. I think some that we would highlight are bills related to phasing out electric vehicles, as well as bills that enable some of these building sector reductions. We support in particular H3350 by Rep. Mcdonough, which would incentivize communities. It does many different things, including adopting building performance standards statewide to try to reduce emissions from existing buildings. It also incentivizes communities to opt up to that net zero building code and makes some small legislative changes to enhance the ability of Mass Save to reduce emissions as well. So I think that if we do see legislation move on climate, which of course we hope to, it's going to be some of these smaller fixes. Like we've had a roadmap for 8 months now. We can really dig in and plug the gaps of where roadmap didn't do enough to enable programs and policies that address the climate crisis. In addition, I think we'll likely see a wind bill, although as one of my colleagues who works on wind said, the wind bill is really more of an economic development bill than a climate bill. So it won't necessarily really ramp up the amount of emissions reductions we can hope to see from the electric sector. And I think our breakout rooms are closing in 45 seconds. I'm not sure if we have time for one more question. So I will start to wrap up by saying thank you for joining, and check out our blog, blog.greenenergyconsumers.org/blog. And if you do have time today, please donate to our advocacy program, because that enables us to expand the work that we're doing to fight the climate crisis in Massachusetts.
Thank you for joining today. So this is an EV Chat Fun Cars. So what that means is we normally have our typical group of EV ambassadors or EV owners who come and act as panelists, but we have a lot of repeat offenders, which is fantastic for us, but doesn't always give folks like a different variety of vehicle owners to hear from. So we decided to name this one Fun Cars to get people with different cars to join. So you'll hear from them in just a few minutes. But before that, I'm just going to introduce my staff here at Green Energy Consumers, who is helping me moderate this. So without further ado, Anna, can you start?
Hi, everybody. My name is Anna, and I am the Electric Vehicle Program Director at Green Energy Consumers. I'm really glad to see you all here. We had a fair number of people sign up, so we are ready to break out into breakout rooms if we get too many people in the main room. But for now, I think we will have enough space for a great conversation. And I also wanted to throw out a quick shout out and thank Rep. Steve Owens for joining us today. It's really great to see you here. And I hope you'll have fun learning from all of our lovely EV ambassadors. I will pass it to Adriana.
Hi, I'm Adriana. I am the Drive Green Program Associate here. I work mostly with customer service and marketing and communications, and we're excited to have a cool webinar today.
Jackie. Jackie is our intern, and this is her first webinar with us. So just say hi, Jackie.
Hello. Yeah, so I'm the Drive Green intern, and this is my first webinar, so I'm excited to hear from you all.
Okay, and so just so everyone knows, this webinar is being recorded, so we will circulate a recording of it after the fact. And if you have any follow-up questions, you can circle back with us. But right now, I would just briefly like some of our ambassadors to introduce themselves, just say who you are and what car you have, that sort of thing. And so Ivy, we'll start with you.
Hi everyone, Ivy. I have a Volkswagen ID4 that I just got a little under a month ago, so I'm happy to talk about my brand new experiences with that. And before that, I had a BMW i3 range extender. So if anyone has questions about that car, I'm happy to talk about that one too. Thanks.
Marty, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Marty. I live in Maryland. I have a 2019 Kia Niro EV. I've been driving it. It'll be 3 years in a couple months. I've done 3 or 4 long distance trips from Germantown, Maryland to Auburn, Maine and back. And so I can tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly about, taking it on the road. Thank you.
Perfect. Nate, do you want to go next?
Nate, you got to unmute. Nate is our web developer, so it's very exciting that he can join us today.
Are you asking me?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Blake,
Yeah, my name's Blake Cady. I'm calling about a Volvo XC40, which we've had for a year, and it's really spectacular. Before that, I had a Bolt on lease for 3 years, which I enjoyed very much. It was a good car too. So the Volvo XC40 is just coming on the market. It's got all the bells and whistles, and it's a wonderful thing to drive. It's a small SUV. I'm glad to answer any questions.
Perfect. Thanks, Blake. Nate, can you just introduce yourself quickly?
Oh, I'm unmuted. Okay. I'm Nate. I am the web developer for this company, Green Energy Consumers, and I still have my screening thing up there so you can actually see it if you don't understand what I'm saying. But I also own an ID4, and I actually had mine. I was probably the first person in Massachusetts to get one back in March of 2021. And it hasn't been, and I actually tried my first one other than mine like 2 weeks ago. So I don't know where they've all been, but they just started coming. And you said you had yours a month ago, so that's probably when they started getting delivered. So
actually, Nate, I had to talk the dealership into letting me buy their test drive car.
Oh, really?
That was how I managed to get one in this short time of shortage. So it's a little tip for people who are having trouble getting one that they want.
You were probably the second person in Massachusetts to get one. 2 years afterwards.
All right, hold on. We've got just a couple more people. So Glenn, can you introduce yourself quickly?
Yeah, I'm Glenn Ayers. I live in Greenfield, Mass, and I have a 2019 Kia e-Niro, which I've been driving now for 3 years. I have about 27,000 miles on it, and I've done quite a few adventurous trips. One almost 9,000 miles in 60 days, cross country to California and back about 2 years ago. So anyway, happy to answer questions about going to remote places with an EV.
Okay, so those are all of the ambassadors we had here to talk to you today, introducing themselves. So if anyone has a question, you can use the raise hand feature, or you can just simply, speak out loud.
This is Marty. I have a question for Glenn. I read an article about somebody who did a road trip like you described. Was that did you write about that in Inside EVs, perhaps?
No, I actually wrote a blog, pretty long blog for Green Energy Consumers for Drive Green. Yeah.
Dennis,
I put that in the chat if you want to take a look.
All right, Dennis has his hand up first, and then Jay, I see your physical hand raised. So Dennis, you go first.
Yeah, I have a question. I have a Leaf Plus, and I'm thinking about doing some cross-country, a trip, go through state parks, national parks, and maybe some campgrounds. And I'm curious if anyone's I need some advice as to what kind of adapter I would need to plug into some of the campsites. Would I need more than 1, 2, 3 different types of adapters? Does anyone have any experience with that? That's my question.
Whoever wants to talk first, go ahead.
Yeah, so that's how I did my 8,800 mile trip cross country. I charged every evening at a campground at mostly state parks, occasionally a national park. But that's how I did it. I did a lot of fast charging during the day for lunch, stop charge for a while. But overnight I charged and had a full battery in the morning, and I plugged into the RV connection at the campgrounds. I had to call ahead to make sure that they had a 50 amp connection, which is 220 volts, because otherwise it's too slow. Just a 30 amp RV connection won't do it, because that's a 120 connection. So I got an RV level 2 charger that was portable, waterproof, and came with 5 different adapters with it, dog bone adapters. So I could plug into pretty much anything.
Where did you pick that up? Could you get it online, or?
Yeah, I got it on Amazon. Yeah.
Amazon, and what's it called again?
I will look it up while other people are talking.
So Amazon sells a travel-oriented charger that has multiple adapters called a Must Start Travel Master. It's awesome. I have one in my car all the time.
Could you repeat that? Must Start?
Yeah, it's MUSTART Travel Master, and you can buy it in several configurations. The most common one, it has a standard 110 and a standard 1650, I think, which is the standard 220 volt. But you can buy additional adapters, including the travel trailer 30 amp that Glenn was talking about, and the 50 amp. So you can plug in almost anywhere. Anywhere there's a stove or a washing machine, dryer, there'll be something you can plug into if you get all the adapters.
Right. Okay.
All right, Jay, you are up next.
Thank you, Devin. I'm Jay Miller. I live in Little Compton, Rhode Island. I just bought my first EV, and it's being delivered in a week, and I am completely clueless. I'm going to go on a maiden voyage to Texas from Rhode Island, and my friends are saying, you're nuts. I feel as though I'm nuts because I don't know what to do. I really don't. I mean, I am clueless about how do I plan my trip and make sure that I'm not calling AAA every 335 miles. And I'm not sure what to have here at my house. I'm a bit confused. I called the company this morning that I bought it from, and he suggested a program called PlugShare. I've been playing with that, but I'm not sure it's really valid for planning a cross-country trip. So if anybody would like to kind of help out.
I'll get it. What's the vehicle you bought?
I bought a Tesla S. Okay,
so if you have a Tesla, you can use the supercharger network, and those are that's actually the best so far. That's the best infrastructure they have in the country and around the world, actually, I think, for electric vehicles. And I think most Teslas will charge at a pretty high rate at the superchargers. I would actually get in touch with Tesla, or even there's so many resources online that you can look up and try to navigate through that, because you can pretty much get anywhere in the country via the supercharger network. And that's Tesla's proprietary network that they built just for their cars. So other cars can't really use them.
Oh, they can't.
Just Teslas.
Okay. So is there a way, Nate, of actually planning a voyage, whether it's using the superchargers or other sources, so that one knows where you start in the day and where you have to go to charge?
I'm sure there's actually probably many of them. I don't have a Tesla, so if someone here has a Tesla, they could probably answer the question a little more specifically. Okay. I don't know if anybody does.
Nate, I'm just going to jump in here real quick. It's not necessarily Tesla specific, but I'm sure you could use it being a Tesla owner. I think Anna just linked to it in the chat. It's something called a Better Route Planner, and I do know a Tesla owner who uses it, and he uses it for more long distance trips, like the trip going to Texas. So it helps you plan. I think it calculates like extra weight for you if you needed to.
Yeah, so I want to second that. A Better Route Planner is available as a web app. It's also available as a installed app on your iPhone or your Android phone. And there's a free version where it provides some generic kinds of guidance, and then you can get a subscription, which I don't recommend if you drive a Tesla, but if you drive something else, I might, depending on how often you travel. But it's a great way to figure out in advance where you're going to go, how you're going to get there. So I would use a Better Route Planner to plan your trip. But in the spirit of know before you go, you also want PlugShare so you know what's available when you get there. Because if you arrive at your destination with 20% charge and there's nowhere to charge after that, once you get there, that's a problem. So PlugShare is great for knowing what's available once you get there, or where you are now, you know. Or if you hit a glitch, sometimes not everything always goes the way you plan it. Trust me.
You mean it's like life?
Yeah. So
know where you go and always be charging. Those are the mottos. Plan your trip and always be charging.
Did we hit all your questions, Jay, or was there something that we missed?
No, thank you. I don't want to take more time. I guess the only other question I would have, if somebody else has the same question, is similarly, what would we put in our home? Not just for a Tesla necessarily, but in case we get another, electric car. Is there something that will satisfy all electric cars? Thank you all.
So does anybody have a level 2 station installed in their house that they want to talk about?
Yeah, I do. Nate does. Go ahead, Nate.
Yeah, level 2. Technically, level 2 charger is a 50 amp outlet that usually is used for like a electric stove. Those pack the most power that you can put in your house. You can also use even a dryer amp, a 30 amp. But I mean, it's kind of it's a pretty extensive topic though, because you can either get a EVSC unit that actually works as almost like a GFCI in between you and your car, or you can just plug it right into the outlet. So it's like, I guess I can go on forever about this. Do you have a more succinct answer that you could give him about this?
So I would suggest, for starters, to just get a 240 volt 50 amp plug as close to where your car is going to be as you can get it without getting outside the house. In my case, it's in the front of the interior of the garage, and then I just plug it from there. And I would recommend to start, you just get that plug, actually socket, and then you can plug your charger into that, your 240 volt charger into that, and charge your car. That way you can use your travel charger at home and when you travel. But you can also install a permanently mounted charging station in your home, in your garage. It's going to cost more. It's less utile because it's dedicated and you can't take it with you. But those boxes tend to be smart. That you can program them, you can pull stats off of them, and you can spend a lot of money on those as well if you're into that. But you get what you pay for.
So I will say for that, you can get it installed at your home for not that much money. If you don't have any like background electrical issues going on, it could cost you with the unit and the work about $1,000 to get it installed. And you can check up on our website to see like kind of like a cost comparative or just some tips and tricks about that if you'd like. You can also get it installed on an exterior wall. You just want to look at the NEMA rating. So you want a NEMA rating of 3 or 4. That way it's like either weather resistant or like really weather resistant. So that's that. Glenn, did you have something to add?
Yeah. I had a dryer plug down in my cellar, but I don't have an electric dryer. We use like solar powered, wind powered clothes dryer outside. We hang our clothes on the line. And so we had never plugged in a dryer into that outlet. So I just pulled the staples. I drilled a hole through the sill of the house and fed the wire out. And I mounted a waterproof socket on the outside of the house. And that's what I plug in. I have a Max Green 16 amp charger that's waterproof that came with all of the adapters. And so if I need to, I just plug that in. It is only 16 amp. It's not a 30 amp charger, but you can plug. I got it because it would take 220 or 120, 240 or 120. It doesn't have to be a 220 outlet. And so that works for me. It cost me about $10 to mount that on the outside of my house. I realized it wasn't done by an electrician, but all I did was move it from one place to another. So I don't know that it would cost $1,000 to do that. It would probably cost you maybe a few $100s to get an electrician if you're not handy to do that.
I'm going to post just in the chat what the EVSC that I bought. It's probably it's not like a unit you actually mount. It's actually an inline plug with a nice flexible plug for the 240 outlet. Because a lot of them, they can be pretty expensive now. And this one is under $400, which is a pretty good deal. It works fine. It just to take up the space. So I'm going to actually, I'll just plug the link on there for you guys in case anybody's interested.
I think the Max Green one that I bought was about $200 or $250, and it came, like I said, with 5 adapters, and it's 20 feet long, so I can pull into a campground and get pretty close to the RV connection, and overnight that's plenty of charge. I think it charges around 15 to 20 miles an hour, something like that. So it's not the fastest level 2 charger, but it's good enough for overnight. If you're going to be in a campground for 8 or 10 hours, the battery's fully charged overnight.
Yeah, I'm just trickle charging now because I'm not taking any long trips, and it's working fine with my ID4. I mean, you plug it overnight, you get a pretty good charge. You can't get it quick. You can't get a lot of miles in the short term, but if you're like doing a moderate day commute, you'll get what you need once you plug it in at night. I think especially with the newer cars like the ID4, the rates are pretty high. So
Kate, can you explain the term trickle charge for people who haven't heard it before?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm using this. Trickle charge is just plugging the adapter that comes with your car into a 120 volt outlet.
So like the same outlet you plug your phone into kind of thing.
Yeah, it's the same thing as you plug any appliance into. It's a typical outlet.
Okay. All right, we have some patient hands raised. So Jeff, you are next.
So I was, Glenn had volunteered asking or said he could talk about experiences sort of like out in the wild, I guess, with an EV. So 2 things. One is just experiences charging when you're going to a campsite or someplace where you don't have a charger, what you've done. And then secondly, what about in terms of the, sometimes when you're in roads, it's not necessarily off-road, but you're in places where, you need a more, more distance from the road to the base of the car, to the chassis. Does the Nero provide that, or anybody else who's got a vehicle that, does better in those types of conditions? I'd be interested in their comments.
Well, I'll just say the Nero's not an off-road vehicle by any stretch, but it does have enough clearance that I can get into the Adirondacks, on dirt roads, and it's just front-wheel drive. So, it's not four-wheel drive, but we haven't gotten stuck anywhere. And I had, prior to getting the Nero, I had a Prius C, which has about 2 inches of clearance, maybe 4 inches. So this was a big improvement over that little Prius. But we haven't hit any rocks or anything, but we're careful. It does have a big battery underneath. But no problems going into some very remote areas. Mojave Desert, really out in the Southwest, lots of places where, you'd want a truck probably to get into, but we didn't have any problems.
What about Kim? You have an Audi e-tron, and I haven't heard from a lot of Audi e-tron owners. How's the clearance on your car? How was your experience with your car?
So far, so good. It has great clearance. It's got air-like suspension, so it changes itself, or I can adapt the ride manually. And I can also, it's a Quattro, so it's all-wheel drive.
So you could go off-roading if you wanted to.
I guess I could. My husband has a 1961 Jeep that is not an EV, but he does go off-roading in. I wouldn't go there.
There you go.
But it's, this is my third electric vehicle. I started with a 2013 Volt, and I upgraded to a 2017. I liked that new body style. It was a little more spacious. And then decided to make the leap to all electric versus, although the generator in the Volt, that little gas powered generator, is a nice safety feature if you're nervous about long range. But I've so far been very happy with the e-tron.
And Ivy just made the leap to all electric. And how are you finding it?
Good. It's good. Like Kim said, I think it was definitely nice to have that 3 years where I had that little, it was just a 2-gallon little range extender on the BMW i3. So I knew if I pushed it, I could always stop at a gas station and do something. But after 3 years of that, and now that the ID4 can go, I don't know, at least 100 miles further on a charge than the i3 could. So I definitely was ready to make the leap to the all electric. But yeah, no, it's I think both cars are definitely worth a try for people who are looking.
Perfect. Okay, Ken Mcdonough, who is not just Ken. You guys are up.
Yeah, we are up there.
Hi, it's Ken and my wife Ann, and we live in Sherburne, Massachusetts. I've been doing a lot of reading. It seems that Volkswagen with the ID4 has kind of hit the sweet spot in terms of the vehicle as well as the price of the vehicle. And you've got a $7,500 federal rebate and a $2,500 Massachusetts, so you're knocking off 10 grand. The only criticism that I've read about it, and you two ID owners can talk about it. They said that the electronics are very busy and not very intuitive and are annoying, including not being able to roll down the windows from your our side where the buttons are on the armrest. That doesn't exist. That you have to go through the computer. So they said there was a big learning curve. Maybe you guys could comment on
that. I'll start and then I'll let the person who's had the ID4 for a long time answer some of those. Just on your first comment about the windows, I have not tried this, and there's lots of stuff that I haven't had a chance to try yet, but I do hear that there is a trick where you hold it down until it flashes, and then you can roll all the windows down at the same time. I feel like I saw that on some sort of YouTube video when I was looking at them. So I think there are some quirky things like that where it's not intuitive, right? There aren't 4 buttons to roll down the 4 windows on the driver's side, right? But so I do think there are some quirky things like that, and it's too new for me to tell you whether I think they're fun or annoying yet, because I'm still learning. but I haven't found anything where I could not do something that I wanted to do or find something that I wanted to find. But I do know what you're talking about, which like I said, I do think it is a little, there are some like quirky things where they've clearly sort of wanted to have the design be sleek and put more things in the sort of like electronic panel that you click buttons on. So yeah, it's definitely worth test driving and trying out. And when you do the test drive, not just driving, actually, you know, putting in the navigation and making a phone call and doing the radio and trying all that stuff out and making sure that it works for you. But I'll let Nate talk about the long term.
I have to get going too, but I will say that yeah, you just hold down the button for like a second, and then it'll just little light will switch on, then it comes up. That's it's not as intuitive as everybody's used to, but other than that, I could go on for a long time about how much I love the car, and it has more storage space than my old Ford Escape Hybrid. It's probably the quickest car I've ever driven. It's amazingly quick. I mean, you go right, you know, you don't want to do this very often, because I say when you're on the highway, you don't want to really go over like high 60s, because your efficiency goes way down after you go up. So that's something everybody has to remember when they drive on the highway. You're going to drive like, don't mind my grandfather or grandma. you want to drive like that. That's how you want to drive. And you'll just be looking at everybody else in their ICE cars and be like, you know how wasteful you're being right now. Not only do you have a gas car, you're going way too fast, and you're just burning gas for the heck of it, you know. So those are my.
Don't listen to him. I drive super fast in my ID.
well, you probably have to charge it a lot more. That's all I can say. But no, I do. I actually accelerate fast because it's so fun. But then I settle down after that. Other than that, yeah, it's great. It's a great car. I wholeheartedly, if you can get your hands on one, of course, I wholeheartedly recommend it. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Well, after you judged me, and I think some of our other people, for being speed demons, Nate, I'm going to ask Blake and Kim if your cars have similar quirky features or other features that you just want to like talk
People
about.
go all the way out west, Jeannie, and you can stay.
Do you want me to go ahead?
Yeah, Blake, go ahead.
Well, the Volvo is all-time four-wheel drive. It's got 200 plus miles potential, but keep in mind all these things. They don't want you to charge above 90% because of risk of fires and stuff, and they don't want you to drive less than about 20%. So your range is not what you read in that book. It's 30% less than that. But we plug in on a trickle charge because all our driving is local and around the town, and we haven't tried a long trip on it yet. We think that the Volvo screen is didn't happen to like the Tesla screen. It was just too big and too intrusive. The screen's very very good on the Volvo, and easy to use, and you call it Google, you get Hey Google in it, you can do all your things remotely that way. Windows, heat, radio, whatever. But it's a wonderful car. Great acceleration, fun to drive. Take corners because of low battery and low center of gravity, as all electric cars are. But we're very pleased with this one. We're going to wait. It's on a lease, so we're going to wait for the end of the lease and see if they haven't come up with a better battery option. But that's a couple of years away.
All right. Well, if Blake hasn't sold you on the Volvo XC40, let's see what Kim can do about the Audi.
Well, I looked at the Volvo first. I kind of did comparison, and I can say the car is quick. Although I did read, I think the Volvo is like a second faster in the 0 to 5. But it's a great car to drive. it doesn't do Hey Google, but there are a lot of options, you know, that you can set with the computer. There's a dual screen that you can use, and it's very integrated into the dashboard. Unlike, I know on the Tesla, it's kind of just, you know, like there, big sort of. I think that as far as charging, I don't charge frequently because I do a lot of local driving. So maybe once or twice a week, I do have a charging station installed in my garage. So it's the 220, I guess. So it charges in about 4 to 6 hours, I would imagine. And then I have a high speed. There's, I think it's either Electrify America or a Plug Share right down the street. So if I decided I wanted to take a trip to Vermont, I can go and I can charge. And Audi says that if you're taking a trip, you can go ahead and charge to 100%, but otherwise I do have it set at 80% capacity to charge. Winter months, I've noticed a lot less range than I did over the summer and the warmer months. So I know we were talking earlier about planning a trip. I've gone and I've looked at both Plug Share and Electrify America to see where I can find fast chargers that I can get 80% in 30 minutes, they say. So we'll see.
I'd like to talk about charging, if I may. So when you're at home and you're charging on your 110 or your 220 or your 240, you can charge to 100% regularly without damaging the battery. But when you're fast charging on the road, you typically don't want to charge more than 80% or so for two reasons. One, the rate of charge slows down dramatically after that. And secondly, it does stress the battery to charge too high on a fast charger or rapid charger. But at home, charge it to 100%. And so typically, if you're going on a long trip, you charge to 100% at home. You go that first leg. Ideally, you arrive at your first charging stop with a state of charge below 20% and a hot battery, which is, if you're on the road, is the way it's going to be. You charge to 80 and you go to the next leg. And at the end of the day, how far a leg is as much dependent on the range of your bladder as it is on the range of your battery. You know, and my experience is that almost every electric car out there goes further than my bladder anyway. So that's my 2 cents.
Thanks
One
for
more
explaining
comment
that.
about the
Oh, go ahead.
Volvo. One more comment about the Volvo is it's not self-driving, but it has features. So if you drift out of lane, it brings you back automatically. Or if you're backing up and it detects you're too close, it stops you without. Those are both features that seem to work well. So did you say that if you're trickle charging, you can charge it to 100%?
That was a yes. You did a thumbs up. All right.
I've got 15 more minutes of this electric car seminar.
Oh,
yeah, I'm charging 100% at home a couple times a week for 3 years, and my battery degradation is 0. So.
All right, just quick, I want to move on to some raised hands. Darryl, go ahead.
Hi there. Thank you. Going back a little bit, someone was saying about charging from home, and I think you have to be careful that you, if you're going to charge more than 8 amps, you want to make sure that you have nothing else on a circuit at home. Like I know our Volt and Bolt charge at 20 amps, you know, so you want a little bit, 12 amps. So you want a 20 amp circuit to do that, but they should be nothing else on it, or you might be tripping the breaker all the time. And when
dedicated circuit's best, right?
Pardon me?
You want a dedicated circuit for your charger.
Correct, you do. You definitely do, even if it's at 8 amps, but you'd probably be okay if it's 8 amps as long as you don't have some motor kicking on all the time. And that's when you might do the breaker. And the other thing was that we have a Bolt that we did get a new battery, and they have they recommend that you only charge until like 90% or something like that. So you can set I don't know what they call it, the hill reserve or something. So we've always done that unless we go on a trip. So that's good. And then the other thing, just quickly, I know I was just texting with Jacqueline. We went out of town on our first time getting out. We call it the Breakout Tour, and we went to San Diego. And I don't want to drive a gas car, and we have two electric cars. So we rented a Tesla out there, but we had to go to LA to pick it up. And I'm really glad because gas was over $6 a gallon, and we had free charging because we rented the car before March 1st. So free supercharging. So it was a dream come true. I really loved it. I loved the car. Navigation was amazing and all that sort of thing. There was a learning curve though, I must admit. So thank you all. It's really great that you guys everybody here is trying to learn more about doing electric vehicles, and it's coming, and we just have to get more rental cars and more people, familiar. That's how you can become familiar with these cars. If you could rent them for a reasonable price, you get to know the good side of them. And so thanks to Green Energy for doing this.
Well, Daryl, before you mute yourself, why does your tagline say Hertz Tesla rental? Are you renting a Tesla from Hertz right now?
I did for 2 weeks on our 2-week vacation. So I didn't want to drive a gas car, even though we went to San Diego, and I didn't want to be driving a gas car. We don't drive a gas car in Boston, so I wasn't gonna drive but they only rent them in 5 or 7 locations, in San Francisco, LA, Miami, Orlando, and Fort Lauderdale. Maybe it's 5. I can't think of the other 2 if it is 7. So that's kind of a bummer. We did take the train from San Diego to LA to rent the car to come back to San Diego. And then when I dropped off the car, I had to go back to LA to drop off the car. And LA traffic is nothing to sneeze at. It's horrendous. So I didn't do full self-driving. I don't think you can rent that, but it did the what do you call it, autopilot or whatever, and that worked really well on the highway. It didn't work that well if you were off the highway. So it was great in traffic on the highway. Kept you in the lane, and it kept you adaptive cruise, kept you certain distance, whatever you wanted to set it from the car in front of you. So it worked. It was a lot of de-stress, and I was in a lot of traffic both times that I had to go to LA. So it was a great experience, I want to tell you. And the charging was easy. You just put it in and it tells you when you're going to get there, how much you're going to have in your battery. And they really do want you to get there under 20% because it tapers. And I always try to get a 250 kilowatt charger, which they have a ton of them out there. So yeah, it's really, they know what they're doing. I mean, they have their problems like everybody, but they know what they're doing. So a lot of advantages I found over our 2 cars, 2 Chevys.
Great.
Okay, anyone else?
Yeah, we have Richard. Richard, you have your hand up. What's your question? Oh, you're muted.
There you go. Hi, I don't have an electric vehicle now. I have a regular gas operated Toyota Camry. And I like the Camry because the ride is very soft, very comfortable. I have some minor back problems. And so I read that recently an review in the most recent Consumer Reports, they mentioned, for example, the Tesla Model 3 is critiqued because it's a very stiff ride. And my experience with gas SUVs, especially the 4-wheel drive versions, there's so much more stiffness in those cars that I cannot tolerate SUVs. And it seems every electric car coming out now is an SUV. So I got a question to ask you. You know of full electric car now that is very comfortable? Or what is your critique on all the electric cars that you've driven? How comfortable were they? What is your suggestion? Wait 3 more years till there's more models coming out, more sedans, you know? So
Ivy.
I'll leave that now.
Ivy has a lot of experience in this, so I'll have her go first.
Not only, you might not know this about me, Devin, but I only drove Camrys before my electric car experience. So I had a Camry for 10 years and I loved it and thought I would always drive Camrys. And then I test drove a new Camry, or I rented it actually. We were talking about rental cars and I didn't like it as much. So that was sort of what prompted my whole looking at electric, because I had never thought I would even stray from the Toyota Camrys. And then when I didn't like the ride as much, that's what sort of prompted me to go look and see what else there is. I was just going to say, Richard, I test drove a ton of cars, both 3 years ago before I leased, and then now this past 6 months before I leased. And I was shocked at how different the feel of the rides is with every single car. Like, and I don't, maybe us Camry drivers are more sensitive. I don't know. But I was like shocked. There were cars I got into and drove and was like, absolutely not. I will never drive this car, right? And they were perfectly fine cars and cars that other people love. Like but I did test drive a ton of them, and even the ones that I did like were different from each other as well. So that would be my suggestion. 3 years ago, it was really hard to get dealerships to even have an electric car for you to test. And now I had a much easier time just going and saying, I want to test your electric car, whichever one you have. And there are lots of options, but I did think they were really different. And I got used to being up higher, because the i3, even though it was a teeny tiny little car, you were up higher like you are in an SUV. So that was why I ended up with the ID4, because I liked the being up higher, even though parking in Cambridge is not going to be as fun with a bigger car. But I would say there were a fair amount of lower ones and sedans out there. So I feel like if you go through the list that's on the Green Energy Consumers website and sort of like look at the options and then contact those dealerships and drive them, I think you'll be glad that you tested them and felt them, and because they all had sort of a different seat feel, a different drive. Ones that I thought I would really like. Some of them I didn't like the ride. I didn't like the feel of the seat. So I would say that's my best advice, is to test drive if you have the time to go and test drive a bunch of them.
Yeah.
And while there is an inventory shortage right now, most dealerships have cars to test drive. Ivy's car is one of those cars, actually. They had quite the time getting her car. So actually, Ivy, would you just mind telling people the state of like the buying an EV or getting an EV now and how crazy that can be?
Yeah, it's totally crazy. I mean, my experience was I test drove a whole bunch and I sort of got the feel, because as you were test driving, the dealerships would be like, if you want one, you got to tell me now, right? It's going to be a while. They'll give you the heads up. I feel like that also makes it hard in terms of getting a lease deal, right? So I feel like 3 years ago, on the Green Energy Consumers website, there were all deals and I could go to the dealership and say, oh, this dealer is offering this. And now I feel like they're right. They can't keep the cars on the lots. So the ones that they get in, people are on wait lists for them, and they are trying to get them out the door. And then once, there's such long waits for some of the cars that when they come in, people have already gone out and gotten something else. So I feel like that's sort of where your opportunity is, if you're looking to get one soon, is to, get to know the dealerships and sort of figure out which car you want, and then get on the wait list, get your number in their hands, so that when someone cancels, right, the one that they had reserved, you can get it. I also had the experience of going to some dealerships where they didn't even want to do leases, right? There were so few cars and they're getting so few in that they're not even bothering to offer to lease. They would only sell. So I had that experience as well. But my sense is that, I'm sure it depends on the car, but my sense is you're talking about months, unless you can find one that someone someone didn't take. And I saw in the chat that someone had asked if anyone had an all-wheel drive. Mine is not, but I will say there were ones that came in where people had reserved an all-wheel drive version of a car or an all-wheel drive ID4, and then in the 6 months it took for the car to come in, they went and bought something else, and so they had all-wheel drive cars available. But you had to be on top of it. You had to sort of jump in while you could. And I don't have any sense, Devin. I don't know if there's any word on what does it ease up anytime soon, but I definitely, when I talked to the folks at the dealerships, they did not see the end anywhere near. That they felt like it was unpredictable when cars would come in and how long it would be before the 22s came in, all of that kind of thing.
Yeah, that is that's a sense I'm getting from dealers and from my research, is that it is going to be this way for the foreseeable future. So I just don't know. We will definitely keep people updated and just continue to do educational content in the meantime. But we're figuring it out. Glenn, you've had your hand up for a little bit. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that the Kia e-Niro is, to me, it's very comfortable, especially on long trips. It has all kinds of adjustments, lumbar support, and if you didn't know it was an electric car, you can't tell from being inside the car. It doesn't appear to be an electric car in any way, really, other than it doesn't have a tailpipe. It is very, very plain, standard car in a parking lot. You could not tell it from any other small crossover kind of car. But I found it very, very comfortable, easy to get in and out of, and it has a lot of cargo room because we pack it with a lot of gear and 2 dogs as well, and we actually can sleep in the back of the car if we have to. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Okay. For people to remember, as far as Tesla goes, they've used up their 200,000 cars, so you don't get any federal 3,500 backs on them. The other thing I didn't like about the Tesla was you sit quite low. As somebody mentioned, the Volvo, you sit much higher. It's just more comfortable in terms of driving. And the other thing people don't mention is that with gas prices going up, I save over $2,000 a year just in gas and no maintenance, as we all do that are driving electric. But it's something to keep in mind when people say the car is too expensive. You got to keep that in mind.
And just to expand upon Blake's point about the 200,000 units in Tesla. So part of the federal tax credit is that the manufacturer only has 200,000 units to sell before that federal tax credit starts to phase out. And so for the only manufacturers that have hit that unit mark are Tesla and Chevy. So all other manufacturers are eligible to get that federal tax credit for their customers. Plus, if you're in Massachusetts, there's the More EV rebate. So you can check that out. If you're in Rhode Island, like me, it's not going to happen. There's no rebate. But we have a few more minutes left. So does anyone have any questions that they want to ask before we have to wrap up? No.
Hey, this is Harold. I do have a question. For the, I think the person with the Volvo and the person with the Audi e-tron, do they come with a spare tire? And if so, have they had to use it yet?
I do have a spare in my car and I have not had to use it.
And that's Kim with the Audi e-tron. I don't know if you can see us.
Oh, sorry.
No, your screen is off, so I don't know if you can see the screen or not. I just want to make sure.
And one follow-up question to that is, did the person with the Audi e-tron, did they buy it because they had a spare tire or because of something else?
No, I didn't buy it because it had a spare. I bought it, I wanted something that had kind of, that was had more options, was more comfortable, had the fully electric instead of, any gas at all. And I can say that the e-tron is very comfortable to drive. It is considered, I've got the Sportback, it is considered an SUV, but it doesn't really look like one to me. And it's easy to get in and out of. And the ride is nice, and you can adjust it to, you can do a sporty ride, or you can do a more luxurious ride, or you can do a conservative type of ride, and the car's suspension will adjust to that. So there are a lot of options as far as comfort goes. It's a little more, the Volvo, a wonderful car. I almost found myself in one, but it's a more utilitarian on the inside to me, whereas the Audi has, I don't know, a little bit more, like there's some wood trim in it, and it's a nice, it's nice. And then it has other things too. For instance, the lane assist, the adaptive cruise control. It had all the kind of the bells and whistles that I was looking for. I didn't even consider the spare tire, but probably should have.
I just learned that I have a spare tire after 4 years of owning a car, so don't you worry, Kim. Ivy, you unmuted.
I was just going to say, since this is the fun car webinar, I was just going to say the thing that I thought was most fun about the ID4, and I would love to hear what the other owners think is the sort of the most fun thing about theirs. But just the VW ID4, the first edition, my gas and brake pedals are pause and play buttons. Not gas, but the go pedal and the stop, which I think is super fun. It has ambient lighting, so you can set what color you want the interior to be like. And it's got a good sound system, and it drives fast, and it's fun to drive. So those are we're like a deeply pragmatic group here on this call, but just to throw some of the like very unpractical fun things about the ID4 out there.
I appreciate that. I should have done that to start with. I'm ashamed. Marty, what is really fun about your car?
Well, it's the same thing that's fun about any electric car, which is you hit the pedal and it goes. I mean, it just pushes it. Even the most modest electric car out there, you punch the pedal and it's going to put you back in your seat. It's just fun. I don't know anyone, the first time they get in a car and they hit that pedal, they don't chuckle to themselves. It's just so much fun. And same thing, if you need to pass somebody on the highway. I mean, I don't know how many Porsches I've smoked just going up the road.
That's some serious cool cred. All right, Glenn, I have a feeling it's going to be camping related.
Yeah, so on our car, we put on a roof rack, and I put extensions on, PVC extensions. So I fit two 10.5-foot canoes on top of the car, and then all of our camping gear for a 3-week trip or a cross-country trip, but we don't take the canoes cross-country because that much wind resistance really cuts down on the range with canoes, especially if you get up above 40, 45 miles an hour. But we've done several trips out to the Adirondacks with all of our paddling gear, and we found a level 2 charger at Paul Smith's that they just recently put in. And so we stayed there overnight. They have a lean-to that you can rent. And then we had a full charge, full battery in the morning, and we could drive anywhere basically we wanted to in the Adirondacks. And we hit a lot of canoe paddling areas, the Bog River, which is fantastic, and the St. Regis canoe area, which has dozens of lakes in it. So fantastic area. And it was really figuring out where we could park overnight to charge, because there are no fast chargers in that region. But Paul Smith's put in 4 charge point level 2 chargers, free charging. And so it was a good deal. Anyway, that's most of our trips have to do with going off to camp or paddle, for extended time periods.
Okay. All right, Blake, what is a fun thing about the Volvo that you enjoy?
Well, like everybody said, the acceleration is smooth and unbelievable. And it's a safety feature as well as being fun. When we first got the car, I asked when we should bring it in for the first maintenance, and he said 20,000 miles. So there's virtually no maintenance on them, in contrast to gas engines. It's just fun to drive. It's stable. It's got great pickup. It's the seats are comfortable. All the bells and whistles work well, and I just think it's the way to go. And it, as I said, it saves $2,000 a year from combination of maintenance and gas. So that makes the economics, if you figure it over long term, much more satisfactory.
Perfect. All right, Robert, do you have a quick question? I see you have your hand raised. I'm sorry we didn't get to you earlier.
Yes, the Tesla full self-driving has the ability to automatically take the car and pass somebody else on the highway. Does anybody else have the ability in their car to drive on one of the major roads, a 95, 93 type of thing, and it automatically passes cars as well as keeping you in the lane? Okay, thank you.
Silence as a no. Okay. All right. So we are at time. So I just want to say thank you everyone for joining today, and thank you everybody who was on our panel. If we didn't get to your question, feel free to send it to me when I send a roundup email tomorrow. And if you are on this call and you weren't a panelist and you want to become an EV ambassador for us, I think Anna sent out a link in the chat, and I will also send another link out in the follow-up email. And if you want to just continue these types of conversations all the time, follow our events, and also check out our Drive Green community page on Facebook, where a lot of these conversations happen. So thank you again, and have a great rest of your night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Calling something natural doesn't make it clean or healthy. Natural gas is really methane gas, a dirty fossil fuel, just like coal and oil. Using gas for cooking and heating releases chemicals that can cause diseases, especially for kids, the elderly, and communities of color. Protect your family's health. Move up to clean electric stoves and heat pumps, and look for these appliances when buying or renting a new home.
Have you ever thought about how your house affects the planet? As Thoreau said, what's the use of a house if you haven't got a tolerable planet to put it on? This is the story of transforming my house and making a difference. We now pay 0 energy bills, we produce more energy than we consume, and we're doing our part to help the planet. I'm a single dad with 2 amazing daughters, and I've been thinking a lot about what kind of world we're leaving to our children, and my personal responsibility for that world. You've probably heard all the bad news about the climate crisis, melting polar ice caps, rising ocean levels, and bizarre weather. It seems pretty overwhelming sometimes, and maybe that makes you want to tune it out, even though you know it's real. But then there are those moments when you really wish there was something you could do about it. And then you think, what can I do to make a positive difference? That's the question I asked myself a few years ago, and here's what I came up with. I did a bunch of research and learned that our carbon footprint, the amount of carbon pollution a family produces, is the direct result of the food we eat, the stuff we buy, our transportation, and the energy efficiency of our home. Of these 4 things, improving our home was the most important change we could make to reduce our family's carbon footprint. So I decided I wanted to take our house, a wasteful energy consumer, and turn it into an energy producer. But how? I did some more research and found that it's possible to renovate a home so that it produces more renewable energy than it uses. It's called net positive energy, and it means rethinking the status quo. All this new information and awareness was making my head hurt. It felt like I was waking up for the first time to the reality that I actually had to do something. And then I discovered something really incredible. When I started doing something to help, I actually felt better. As I aligned my actions with my values, the feeling of being overwhelmed flipped into a feeling of strength and empowerment. So let me tell you how we did it. The first thing was to bring together a small project team: Caleb the carpenter, Bill the construction guy, and Mark the energy engineer. Mark and I began by pulling out some paper and starting to sketch. Quickly, the 10 key elements that needed to come together became clear: roof and plumbing extensions, wall insulation, attic insulation and air sealing, basement insulation, high-performance windows, ventilation, better appliances, better lighting, solar electricity, and solar hot water. Not only were we going to renovate the house, we were turning it into a laboratory for eliminating our home's carbon footprint and increasing our sustainability. We were going to lower our costs and demonstrate how we could live in a way that felt true to our values. We started with some diagnostic testing to see where our house was consuming the most energy. An infrared scan, a way to make invisible energy use more visible, showed us the areas where we needed a lot more insulation. And a blower door test showed us where the big air leaks were. Insulation is like the layers of clothing we wear outside in the wintertime. Air sealing is like putting on a windbreaker over those layers to keep the cold air out. Both are important for optimal comfort. We designed a system that would allow us to install spray foam insulation directly on the outside walls of the house. We called it outsolation. First, we did two things to prepare. We extended out the gable ends of the roof to create an overhang and extended the piping for the water spigots and the gas meter. Then we built wall trusses and attached them directly over the existing siding. Once the trusses were in place, our insulator sprayed closed-cell foam on the outside walls of the house. Insulation performance is measured in R value. The higher the R value, the better the insulation and comfort. The spray foam more than tripled the R value of our walls, from a typical R13 wall to R43. Then it was on to the attic and the basement. In the attic, we air sealed all the gaps that the blower door test had shown us to keep the warm air in our house from leaking up into the attic, which had been causing ice dams, increased energy bills, and seriously reducing our comfort. Then we installed a radiant barrier in the attic to keep our house cooler in the summer. And finally, we blew in a bunch of cellulose made from recycled newspaper to bring the insulation value up to R76. In the basement, we used a simple system to insulate the concrete floor and foundation walls: moisture-blocking paint, a wood frame, and foam board. Then we simply created a new floor with painted plywood and new walls with sheetrock, and presto, a finished, comfortable space. Windows are invariably the weak link in any wall system. Our original windows were miserable, leaky, single pane with old storm windows that whistled on a windy winter day. We replaced them with triple pane, high-performance windows. The difference in comfort and energy performance is phenomenal. We've never experienced such high levels of comfort in any house before, ever. Warmer in the winter, cooler in the summer. The dramatically improved insulation levels mean that our home's interior surfaces are actually warmer in the winter, so we lose a lot less of our radiant energy to them. The conventional thinking is to stop insulating here. But if you go here, you get into a whole new zone of amazing comfort and almost non-existent energy bills. We also learned that with a very well insulated and draft-free house, it's really important to provide fresh air to the people living there. The myth for years had been to let the house breathe. But houses don't know how to breathe. They let in outside air not based on what people need, but on the outside temperature, wind conditions, and the amount and location of the air leaks around the house. The best idea is to build tight and ventilate right. We provided assured air quality for the house by simply upgrading our bath ventilation to a high-performance fan with a 24-hour timer. Now we all breathe fresher air, and it's easy to keep good relative humidity levels. And we get fewer colds and viruses. We're all healthier. Next, we did a bit of soul searching to look at ourselves and our behavior to see if there were any changes we could make to reduce our carbon pollution, to live more sustainably. We used a meter to go around the house and measure the electricity use of our appliances. We discovered that our clothes dryer used 6,000 watts, the equivalent of 600 10-watt light bulbs. So we unplugged it and gave it away. Hanging up our clothes on drying racks took a little while to get used to. It seemed like a hassle at first. Now it's just second nature. All of our other appliances are ENERGY STAR rated for high performance. Then we switched out all of our old incandescent light bulbs to new high-performance LED bulbs. We discovered that every energy-using product has two price tags: the purchase cost and the larger cost to power the product over its lifetime. LED bulbs are actually smarter and a lot cheaper than incandescents or compact fluorescents because they use a lot less energy and they last for many years. And finally, after cutting our energy use by more than half, we added the tools to allow us to produce our own clean energy, solar electric and solar hot water panels. The solar electric system provides almost twice the amount of electricity that our home uses. There's a rolling credit on our monthly account and we'll never pay another electric bill. The ground-mounted solar hot water system provides almost 70% of our annual hot water needs. And our ultra-low flow shower head means we could theoretically take a 2-hour shower on 1 tank of solar hot water. As I was doing all this, I started to think about you. I thought about how I wanted to share this information to help you take control of your home's carbon footprint. So I started to take notes and snap a bunch of photos of our project so I could make this video for you. I wanted to show you what's possible. We ended up turning our home into a positive energy producer on a modest budget, and it wasn't that hard. In addition to the dramatic energy savings, we zeroed out our home's carbon footprint, improved our quality of life, and became the first renovated home in Massachusetts to produce more energy than we consume. And look at all of these other benefits that we get to enjoy. It's a win-win-win for our family, for the economy, and for the planet. Our project was a lesson in being bold, in not being afraid to try new things. And it's time for each of us to be bold and to take action now to address the climate crisis. Because frankly, we don't have a lot of time. So, use a carbon footprint calculator to measure your carbon pollution, and then do whatever you can to reduce it. Even if you can't do a full energy renovation on your house, do 1 or more of the 10 things we did, or do something completely different to reduce your carbon footprint. There are so many examples of great things that people are doing to be more sustainable, like Colin Beavan, who started the No Impact Man project to raise awareness about the benefits of personal carbon reductions. Marshall Saunders, who started the Citizens Climate Lobby to empower people to advocate for national policies to address climate change. And Annie Leonard, who created The Story of Stuff to motivate people to rethink their purchasing choices and build a healthier planet. And these are just a few examples. People just like you are doing extraordinary and inspiring things all around the world, and together are making big positive changes. You can be part of this, and you can make a difference. There are so many ways. Check it out. So, envision the future you want, and then get out there and do something to help make it happen. I look forward to seeing you on the path to a healthy and sustainable future.